This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday, August 11th, 2022 edition of the Iowa 911 Communications Council meeting. So a little housekeeping real quick. If you could please make sure that if you're with us virtually that you've muted your line so that we don't hear all the background we're already hearing right this moment. Okay, we'll forego the guest introductions. And Kara, could I have who our council members are today?
Sure. Chris Jasper,
Here.
Lawrence Hartman, George Griffith,
I'm here.
Mike Bryan, Mark Murphy,
Mark Murphy's here.
Jeff Anderson, Richard Pierce, here. Rob Denner,
Here.
Jack D'Angelo,
Here.
Taylor Kiefel. All right, I'm going to go back up. Lawrence Hartman, or Mike Bryant, Jeff Anderson.
Okay, thank you. Could I please get a motion to approve today's agenda? Pierce makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Mark Murphy seconds.
Any discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Against, same sign. Motion carries. And likewise, could I get a motion to approve the July 14th, 2022 minutes? Pierce will make the motion. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Jasper will second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Against, same sign. And motion carries. Blake, do you have a report for us?
I do. My first bullet on my slide is to go over the quarterly financials, so I'll just skip right to that. They were in the room at the table as you enter for those in the room. Otherwise, they are on display both virtually and in the room, so you can just take a look at it that way. Just to kind of go over a handful of things and highlight a few items, kind of starting towards the top. When you see the left-hand column that says wireless service providers, that is the wireless cost recovery that we still fund. That is set to sunset in 2026. And as a reminder, at this point, only one carrier submits invoices for their cost recovery. So that amount has dropped significantly over the years. You can see, again, the associated amount that carrier is charging. You can see the quarterly bills that we pay, both for Comtech for Next Generation Core Services, ICN for Transport, GeoCom for the GIS Data Hub, Zetron for recurring shared services, and GIS grants that were paid out in the month of, or during the last quarter of the fiscal year. So you can see the total for the bills turns out to be about 2.7 million, and 60% of the surcharge that we pass through to PSAPs is 4.8. So just under $500,000 ends up getting transferred over to the operating surplus. A couple other things to highlight as we continue moving down the expenditure form. You can see that we did do a final
blah blah.
Somebody is on. It looks like Aaron Froning might be talking on the call, so if you can mute yourself, that'd be great. Just want to highlight that we did do a final reimbursement. And now Lynn Warren, it looks like you're talking, so if you could go ahead and mute yourself, I'd appreciate it. We did do a final request out of the NG911 grant that closes that grant program out. So we did a reimbursement for about $500,000 there. So we also did the end of year surplus, end of year pass-through process. and that is kind of one of the lower boxes on this form. So the total existing encumbrances and obligations for the upcoming fiscal year, so fiscal year 23, are $4.5 million. We're able to keep and maintain 12.5% of annual revenues and keep that back for catastrophic reserve. So the total that we ended up passing through this year was $1.3 million, which comes out to $12,000, approximately $12,000 per PSAP. So all of that has been remitted. You should have received your checks by now, both for the normal quarterly process as well as the end of year pass-through. If you haven't seen those, you might want to check with your treasurer or check with our office to make sure you get that. And then the starting surplus for 2023 ends up being about $8.5 million. One thing to highlight on the normal quarterly payment sheet, if you remember, we had to withhold some surcharge from Warren County pending the receipt of their expenditure collection form. We did receive that, so they received their full amount for the quarter, plus their back payment that we had withheld previously. If you remember, you basically have a year of grace period after it's due to get it submitted, and you still receive your money. So all of that happened as well. So the numbers you see here are real, and it's what we remitted to all of the counties and all of the PSAPs. Any questions on any of the financials before I move on? Okay. I will continue on then.
Blake, I don't know if you can hear us, but we don't hear you anymore.
Can anyone hear me? No?
We hear you now, Blake.
We got you
Okay.
now.
Yeah, that's really weird. I forced myself onto mute and came off of mute, and then you could hear me. I don't know. I'm just gonna keep going. So, let me know again if the audio goes somewhere, but it looks like everything is okay. So, 26 seats still available. That is basically an all-day course that is held at the state EOC. Again, 26 seats available on September 14th for the next version of the PSAP leadership training. It's basically the same thing that we offered a number of months ago, just with a handful of updates. So if you took it back in February or whenever we had that earlier, no need to re-register. It's really just if you haven't taken that course yet and you're interested. The new expenditure collection form and instructions are finalized and approved. We will be sending that out at the beginning of September, kind of along the lines of our normal email that goes out for annual form collection. So that is all ready to go. I think everyone who has seen it has provided good feedback that the form is much more streamlined and easier. So hopefully it's easier collection process for everyone that submits that form. I sent out an email last week to update everyone on hopefully what becomes the next version of the Next Gen 911 grants. If you remember, I've talked about this for probably about a year or more now, and it's kind of been on again, off again legislation at Congress. The current version of the legislation has actually passed the House at this point, and it's going over to the Senate. That proposes $10 billion for the nation in spectrum sale funds to go towards Next Gen 911. So the devil's in the details a lot on what that will look like, how soon we actually see that money. If it is based on spectrum sale, that is kind of a lengthy process. There's some talk that there could be a loan on the front end to help fund that prior to the sale of the spectrum coming into play with the FCC. So again, more to come on that. Just keep it on everyone's radar. We are having preliminary conversations with folks at the 988 centers, Iowa Health and Human Services, Comtech, couple PSAPs, couple CPE vendors to start kind of digging into technically how it's best to transfer 988 and 911 calls going both directions. So more to come on that, and I'll probably be reaching out to a handful of PSAPs to do some of that testing. An update on the CAD to CAD effort that we've been going through with CISA and DHS and ISICS board. We had a call with those folks last week, 2 weeks ago, to talk about where we were at with that. If you remember, there was kind of a pilot group that was formed kind of in the metro area, and we were expecting a written report at some point. That written report has kind of been pushed off to hopefully the October timeframe. If you want to know why, it's actually because so much is happening in the marketplace with production of CAD to CAD interoperability that they're finding it hard to get the report up to date as things are developing in that arena. So still expecting that report to come out soon, just a little bit later than we had expected it. Finally, on this slide, thanks to Zetron, we found there was a little bit of a glitch with the language link service that has kind of been talked about and information sent out from our office about a statewide contract. So a little bit of history on this. A lot of PSAPs use the vendor language line historically for language translation services. When we migrated to SIP, there was a bit of a compatibility issue with what's called DTMF tones. Basically that tone you hit when you input a number. So if you had to input your account number, those numbers were not recognized by a language line. But we found that another vendor, Language Link, those were recognized. And we kind of talked about, that the process that it would take to get Language Link programmed into your push button transfer systems. There's also a statewide Language Link contract. It's not actually run through our office. It's not specifically designed necessarily for PSAPs, but PSAPs are able to access that contract and do that procurement to get Language Link under contract for their language translation services at their PSAP. There's kind of two different options though, and this is what we didn't know and what we found out. The two different options, one is very similar to Language Line, where you have to input your account number. That still doesn't work. It still doesn't recognize those tones. The other version of Language Link, which is what does work, and we're going to send out an email about this statewide, so you don't have to frantically take notes. You'll get information on this here shortly, later today. The other version of Language Link is what you want. It gives you a dedicated 800 number, dedicated account where you can just get right to a live person without inputting your account numbers. That absolutely works. So again, we're going to update and clarify what we had sent out previously about how to do the Language Link procurement, how to access that contract, and how to make sure you get the right version of Language Link so everything still works and is compatible when you do that transfer. With that, was a lot of information. I'll pause if there's any questions. Okay. Moving right along. An update on GIS grants. If you remember, we are moving to kind of a quarterly upload process. So already, just within the first month of the quarter, 46 counties have met the benchmarks. And also, as a reminder, we're doing that payout at the end of the quarter as well. So it's the same dollar amount. It's really just, it'll be $3,000 at the end of the quarter for the counties that meet that benchmark. So again, well on our way to meeting that quarterly benchmark. Approximately half the counties have already met that. So good job, everyone, on that. No training requests came in this month, so nothing to talk about there. And with that, I will turn it over to Zetron for an update on shared services.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay, thank you. Summer continues to be busy for iWare Shared Services and the Zetron team. In July, we had Clayton County, Marshall County, Warren County all go live. Looking forward in August, we've got Cedar County, Taylor, and Clark going live, as you can see on the dates there. Next slide, please. This is our maps looking. It's looking very, very green, but always room for more. So if you're interested, you can certainly reach out to me. Next slide, please. We just had our summer newsletter come out. If you did not receive it and you would like to, you can email me at lynn.warren@zetron.com. And of course, when the email comes out about the language link, anybody with Iowa Shared Services, I'll be more than happy to help you navigate getting your translation services set up the way you need. Next slide, please. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
And that concludes my briefing as well. I would take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Blake. Just a word, reference to the PSAP leadership training on September 14th. I was glad to have attended it back in February. And if you're thinking about whether it's something that's worth your time, or someone that you work with who has a leadership role in your PSAP, and you're wondering whether they should go to it, I would highly encourage it. It is a really good day spent, very well organized, very well presented, and I think you would get a lot out of it. So if you're on the fence, jump in and get signed up for that. Okay, Blake mentioned we do not have any training fund requests. We'll go to reports. Do we have any technical advisories? Okay, hearing none, could I get a report on ISIX from Captain Pierce?
Yes, I think we have Scott Richardson. I think he should be online. I think he'd be able to deliver the part of that ISIX report. Scott, are you online? Okay, well, hopefully Scott can get online, and I can give a part of that report that we have. The good news on the front of the replacing our SWIC that we have with the Interoperability Bureau, we have a conditional offer out to a gentleman, and we are hoping that things work out with that, and he'll be able to get on board with us here shortly. He should be going to background here, and when that background's done, probably take about 6 weeks, give or take a week or so on that. Also, the school safety radio project is still progressing. We're sorry that we don't have anything out quite yet. We're in the final phases of that. We're meeting with the Department of Education on Monday to do a final review and see if there's any additional amendments or corrections that need to be made. And it is our hope that we'll have something out by the end of next week. So, Scott, are you online now? I guess he's not online, so.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay.
And I have one thing for ISICS as well. This is Blake talking again for those on the line. If I'm taking my 911 hat off for a second, putting emergency management hat on, we have implemented an ISICS test plan with EMAs. At the moment, we're going to be doing it quarterly. So we had our first version of that a couple weeks ago. We're going to work on participation as we go. I don't want to talk about the numbers, but we expect that process to improve. But just wanted to make everyone aware that we're starting that testing procedure with emergency managers on a quarterly basis.
Okay. Anything further?
I think that we are in the process of tearing down one of our old towers, the towers that we had at Laurel Tower that we had, and we're also in the process of the final stages of working out a transfer of our old Muscatine Tower over at the Wildcat Den over to Muscatine County. So that's what I can speak of for right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Can we get an update from U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, and Infrastructure Security? Chris Myers, I know you're online. Can you hear us all right?
I can hear you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Greetings, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person today. We had a little round of COVID go through my house the last couple of weeks, so we're kind of locked up in our residence for the next few days. Wanted to let the council know that CISA put out a couple of products last week. One is a situational awareness product regarding ransomware strains and malware in general. Ransomware has been at the top of the hierarchy for a lot of PSAPs over the past couple of years. This document that was released on August 4th outlines basically all of that type of malware you may have to consider for your PSAP. The big four categories were remote access Trojans. These are things that open back doors that will allow an adversary to take over a victim's computer. The second one is a banking Trojan, not necessarily something that you would think would potentially apply to a PSAP, but it could be something where one of your computers is roped into that and then becomes a part of a botnet that actively works to steal credentials and inject malicious code into browsers. And if you're a banking entity stealing money. Information stealers, general keyloggers that are used to gather login information and then sends it to adversaries. This is one of the ways that malicious actors can gain access to systems. And then finally, ransomware, which a lot of us have seen and heard about previously, where it blocks access to a computer system or specific files until a ransom is paid to cyber criminals. This report is really good because it does suggest some mitigation strategies to safeguard your network and information, and it is something that is worth the read. I sent it out to Blake last week. If anybody wants a copy of that, I can send that out as well, and that is labeled TLP White for widest distribution possible. So on the next slide, there's a program that's coming out. You heard Blake talk about some money potentially for 911 coming up here in the next several months. There's actually going to be a bunch of money that's potentially available for agencies as notice of funding opportunities are likely coming out sometime in August or early September as a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. This law created 378 grant programs that are available for access on build.gov. It lists all the programs along with guidance for state, local, tribal, and territory partners. The thing here is that while a lot of this money is centered around infrastructure, there are communications nexus points to several of these programs, and you may be able to partner with some agencies to gain access to some grant money to help expand your communications networks. So that opportunity to partner with other agencies, again, it has the potential to benefit a lot of mutually shared interests. So please check out build.gov. It does take a little bit to sort through all the programs, but you may find that grant that's an aha moment for you and your local partners. Next thing to talk about today really quickly is the Priority Telecommunications Services. Just in case you're not familiar with that, PTS, as it's called, includes the Government Emergency Telecommunications Service, also known as GETS. It includes the Wireless Priority Service, WPS, for basically wireless voice communications. Think priority calls with a cell phone. and Telecommunications Priority Service, TSP, for repair and installation of circuits and items that may go down from time to time. There's been a lot of work recently on expanding the capability of these services, especially focused around WPS. The one thing I want to stress to this group today is that while that work is still in its preliminary phases with the various carriers, as new features are added, your account will gain that new functionality that's associated with WPS. Keep in mind that this program through PTS allows you to connect to a large number of groups that span multiple levels of government, non-governmental, and private sectors. And you can get easy access through the PTS Dialer app, which is available at no cost via the app store of your choice, whether it's Android or iOS. Now, Gets and WPS on the next slide does cover a wide array of stakeholders. Basically, it covers the 16 sections that CISA really puts a lot of focus on. So you're going to see a lot of outside of public safety partners on this slide that cover everything from basically your dams to your defense industrial base, which you may have some nearby, other types of government facilities that are not necessarily considered to be public safety, information technology groups, transportation, and also not listed specifically on that slide are schools. It is an opportunity for your school personnel and staff to get access to some level of priority for their wireless devices. On the next slide, it'll talk about the finalized transition to the Integrated Operations Division for the emergency communication coordinators like myself. You may have to advance one more slide, Blake. That transition is basically complete. There's been a number of changes with this program over the last several months. The thing that I want to stress to everybody here is that the emergency communications coordinators will operate as they always have. But the one thing that we've been able to gain access is kind of a lateral access to other key CISA personnel within the regions. This includes personnel that are specifically involved with all types of event support, chemical security, which may not be all that applicable to everybody here, but it does give us the ability to access additional resources for training and exercises that potentially expand beyond the standard communications exercise services that we've been able to provide in the past. It allows you to have additional assessments for both cybersecurity and protective or physical security of your facilities, and also additional levels of incident support and post-mortem analysis. So while this transition has occurred, the feedback was heard from state and local partners about making sure that the ECCs can continue to function as they always have. And if anybody wants, I have a flyer for the services that Region 7 offers in addition to the emergency communication services. On the next slide, you'll see that we're still broken down the same way we always have been. The ECCs have always kind of been unique in that we operate in sectors as opposed to region, and we're divided into 3 sectors, the West, Central, and East. I am one of about 15 current ECCs that operate nationwide. I do cover Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, and we have the ability to freely exchange information among our states. So, for example, if Region 7 has a question, I can go to any other region in the country laterally and gain that information. So for the state of Iowa, the long and short of it is that you can expect your services from CISA to remain the same and possibly expand in the future now that this transition is complete. So on the last slide, I realized that in my new role, not many of you may have my new contact information. My new email address is there as well. So feel free to take that down. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will do what I can to get you guys answers related to services that my predecessor, Jim Lundstedt, and the interim ECC, Jim Stromberg, provided to the state. With that being said, Mr. Chair, that's my report. I can go ahead and take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Hope everyone's doing all right there at home. Do we have any reports from the 34A committee or baseline knowledge committee? Okay, any legislative issues that need to be discussed? Okay, do we have any information sharing by council members? Jason Hoffman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Was there something you were wanting to talk about?
Well, I can do it here. Just wanted to report to the council and anybody else that's listening. Our PSAP here in Carroll County experienced some bouts of telephony denial of service attacks. We didn't really kind of know or identify it right away. Kind of started at the beginning of July. We thought it was just kind of one rogue nuisance number, almost kind of sounded like a call center who's maybe, like did outbound calling, and maybe their system was calling our number but not getting through or not transferring somebody. Is kind of what we thought at first, and we just had our IT department block that number. It was coming into a 10-digit administrative line for the county, and they blocked the number, and we moved on with life. But then about a week and a half ago, something like that, we started getting the same types of calls, but a much higher frequency, 30 or 40 within like an hour. And the call would just, continually redial. And took us a little while. It happened in the evening, so IT personnel weren't on site. And our dispatchers, I guess, probably weren't well trained on what to do. And so they just kind of put up with it throughout the evening and through the night until the next morning when I was notified about it, and we got IT on top of it, got them a list of the numbers that were doing it, and they began blocking those numbers. They were oftentimes coming from Texas-based, or at least the caller ID was displaying numbers from area codes out of Texas most often. Of course, they very well could have been spoofed numbers. We have really no idea. So we began blocking those numbers. Carroll County also contacted the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, made a formal report to them. I know that goes to CISA and the FBI, and maybe there's somebody else that gets notified about that, and contacted Chris with CISA, and he kind of gave me kind of a playbook on things to do, like contacting the I3 complaints and making contact with the FBI field office to notify them of the situation. Every hour or so, a new number would pop up and start calling. We had to, get on top of it and block that right away. Most of the calls were either us being put on hold music, or nothing, or lots of clicking and tone sounds. At least a couple of the calls we experienced was an audio recording that was being played over the phone call. It sounded to me, it was all people speaking with a British accent. It sounded to me like it was probably like a 24-hour news channel program that was probably pre-recorded, discussing COVID-19, interviews with healthcare professionals that were dealing with COVID-19. And I had time, so I listened for a little while to try to glean any information I could. But so I don't know what the motivation behind that is. It really was about 2 days, maybe a day and a half of pretty regular calls, and now it's kind of fallen off. But every once in a while, every couple of days, we start getting another call, and we just initiate contact with our IT department, and they block the number from our phone system. As long as they are coming from, outside prefixes and area codes, we feel comfortable blocking those numbers. It gets a little dicier if they start spoofing local numbers. What do you do then? But through the I3 complaint, obviously it's not ransomware. We're not nobody's contacted us demanding money or anything like that. So the level of priority for this type of incident coming into admin lines is rather low. But I think we did, both with talking with the FBI and working with Chris and talking to the I3 Complaint Center, did kind of impress upon them that even though the call volume looks low on paper, when you're thinking about a PSAP call center, we did impress upon them, hey, we are a small center. We have maximum 2 people on duty at any given time, sometimes just 1. And that level of calls coming in for 1 or 2 people to handle, in addition to all the regular work that is expected of them, is definitely hampering our communications and our ability to do the job of public safety. So, hopefully there was some two-way education that happened with that. But Chris, you helped us with that. Is there anything I missed or you'd like to add?
Jason, I think you covered it all pretty well. The big thing I would impress upon everybody is to just keep an eye on that type of activity on your admin lines, especially since we do have a lot of centers with a smaller number of dispatchers on the clock at any one given time in the state. Jason would have a list of those numbers that he would possibly be able to share with you as well, so you can keep an eye out for them. Otherwise, Jason, I think you covered it pretty well.
Thank you. Yeah, and to close out, I would just say what I learned is that while I not when we had 1 or 2 annoyances did I really identify it as a TDOS attack, but when we had such a high volume, I very quickly identified it as a TDOS attack. But I go to meetings and sit into information and hear reports from Jim Lundstedt and Chris and folks, and so I'm hyper aware, but our dispatchers were not. And, we could have mitigated the problem much sooner if they had contacted me much sooner, because our IT department could have remoted in to our phone system and taken care of that pretty lickety split when it started. We know better now, until, you get a little bit of turnover and stuff. So I would just say it is something to information share with line dispatchers and get them a little bit familiar with what can happen, so that it can be mitigated sooner. There's a lot of frustration that could have been avoided if we had just recognized what was going on. But that's all, unless somebody's got questions.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I will add
Mr. Chair, this is Rhonda. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Mr. Chair, I apologize for my earlier mic issue. I went ahead and put the 34A committee update into the chat session. Basically, this last week at the APCO National Conference, I did meet with Paul Curley, the Senior Director of Public Safety, and John Osborne, the Director of Public Safety. They have asked for a little bit of time to just basically review the account. They were not under the impression that there was no communication in items like that. So hopefully I'll have a more in-depth response for you next time, but they've asked for a little bit of time to just review those and see where we could go from there.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you.
All right, and I was going to add, if anyone, just to be wary of, or at least aware of, the First Amendment auditors that are making their way around the state of Iowa, North America for that matter. If you're not familiar with that, these are people that will appear at your offices, and it can be every office, every government office, whether it's city hall, sheriff's office, police station, treasurer, auditor, you name it. If it's got an office and it's a public office, they will visit you. If you haven't been visited already, you will be. And what they will be doing is asking for information under FOIA, Freedom of Information. They will actually inject themselves into calls for service. They will actually create calls for service. They will inject themselves into calls for service that don't involve them, whether it's an arrest or even a traffic accident. And then they will follow through and request information related to that. And it will happen at 911 as well. And so I'm just giving you a warning. When they show up, they will be running their camera. You will be put on the spot, and they love it if you don't know what to do. So if you have not reviewed what your procedure is for FOIA requests, I would suggest that you do that and make sure that all of your employees are well aware of it. Whoever might answer that generally it's a personal visit, almost always personal visit. That's what they're looking for. And they really want to see you squirm, and they want you to not provide what they should, in their opinion, and in many opinions, what would be legal information that they could garner. So just a warning out there. Think about it. They're coming if they haven't been there already. Any other things from council members or from the floor?
Mr. Chair, Rob Denner.
Yes, Rob.
I just put in a link in the chat to a video of a visit that we had last fall, if you'd like to see.
Yes, YouTube is full of them, but I'd be interested in looking at yours. I hope we don't get famous, but some of them are already getting pretty viral, unfortunately.
I would say, rather than firing up a YouTube video on the council meeting, Karen, can you just put the link in the minutes and let people do it that way?
Yeah, that would probably be best. We don't necessarily want to give them a lot of views, but it is interesting, and we've been visited a number of times, and they have literally come to every single office in county government as well as city government in our area. And so be ready for it if you aren't already.
Mr. Chair, we had an experience too that was just slightly different than what you described, where the Second Amendment auditor would just show up at various county buildings and offices and just walk around and videotape. Usually makes people uncomfortable, and then they want to call law enforcement and report them as a suspicious person and stuff, and they're really just they're looking for that police interaction or for somebody to kick them out, or so that was the experience we had. They didn't actually ask for any information; they just walked around and videotaped and whatnot. So
yes, we've seen that as well, and they absolutely adore you if you give them any trouble at all. So the best way to deal with it, in my opinion, is to help them smile a lot, and if everything goes well, they'll lose interest and go find the next place. So it's a challenge, but it's something I think we'll all deal with if you haven't already. Any other information to share? And don't have any new business or travel requests or unfinished business. Jason, I think you addressed your issue. Anything else from our virtual participants that you'd like to speak on? Certainly none in the room that I'm aware of. If that's the case, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Here's somebody make the motion. Very well. We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 We're adjourned, everyone. Thank you.
Pretty sure I heard Jeff Anderson there. Mike Bryant texted me.